Have you ever let a wound fester? Instead of properly cleaning the wound, you just left it in hopes it would heal on its own. A couple weeks down the road, however, you realize your wound has been seriously infected. You still might even hope that it will heal itself. Regardless, reality will set in eventually. You will realize you need to heal it, and if not, it will result in death. Ladies and gentlemen, there is an infection in our lives, in our families, and in our churches, and we have simply ignored it. The infection is pornography, and it's far-reaching. Many mistakenly believe porn is merely a man's problem, but it is not. Nearly 1 in 4 women struggle with porn. The number for men is higher. Approximately 7 in 10 men deal with porn. This comes out to about 1 in 2 Americans. Another sad statistic, 1 in 5 youth pastors and 1 in 7 senior pastors struggle with porn. For me, the saddest of all was last year when I overheard some 10-year-olds I was coaching talk openly about the porn they had come across. This is staggering because there are devastating consequences that ooze from an obsession of porn. These consequences stem from the fact that pornography subverts God's design for personhood, relationships, and the church. Pornography is one of the vaguest terms that most of us know what it is. It is very easy to identify, however, coming up with a definition is much more difficult. In fact, Barnard studies show that many people have very different views of this definition. So I'm not going to give you a black and white definition because someone is going to find something that doesn't fit my definition and think it's all right because it's not porn. With this in mind, porn is anything virtual, whether it be videos, pictures, books, music, movies, or even thoughts that is sexually stimulating. Therefore, what might be porn for one person might not be for another. Regardless of what forms you consume, the effects are similar. I know this in my own life. I cannot stand before you today and pretend that I have not struggled with it. I would be blatantly lying to you. For me, I grew up with it. As this definition points out, it was the thoughts in my head, not images, for the longest time. That changed, however, as my freedoms increased on the computer around 8th grade. It started turning into something much worse. My fantasies were no longer enough for me. I started purposely seeking out porn. It grew into an obsession, consuming all of my free time. I was simply living for the next time I could indulge. During this time, I completely lost my ability to laugh. I fell into depression. I lost hope. Out of the hopelessness, I started turning to porn once again. While I indulged, my problems seemed to go away. But the moment I stopped, I was twice as low as when I'd started. I felt so empty and broken. I was on a rough path. Throughout all my struggling, I was brought back to the fact, the stark difference between what porn was offering and what God was offering. It is through this struggle that I am sharing with you with this today. God has the best plan for relationships, individuals, and the church. Porn, on the other hand, offers a pale substitute. God created individuals in his image, giving them worth and meaning, and designed them to be in a relationship with him. God designed friendships to be about sacrificial love, which is the basis for healthy marriages that point others to God. In the church, we are brothers and sisters united in Christ, fulfilling what God has called us to do. Human value and meaning derives from being created in the image of God. Genesis 1:27 says, "So God created man in his image, in his own image. In the image of God he created him. Male and female he created them." This does not simply apply to one person. Rather, it applies to the entire human race. Male and female, black and white, teenagers and adults. Our value and purpose does not come from who we are, but rather who made us. Regardless of what someone does, even if they are homosexual, pornographer, or a murderer, they still have the image of God on them. Nothing can change that. Their value still comes from God. Part of what it means to be made in the image of God is to be in a relationship with him. And it is from this foundation of loving God that we love others. With a similar thought, Jesus said, the greatest commandment is, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. And the second is like it, you shall love your neighbor as yourself. Commenting on this, Haley and Michael DiMicro say, if we love God with all of ourselves, how can we love others? Doesn't this math not add up? It would, if loving others wasn't a part of loving God with all of ourselves. See, in order to truly love another, you must first love God with everything in you. So, this means nothing is beyond God's reach in your life. If you truly love God, your relationships will be based in Him. Building on this base allows us to care for another's interest above ours. This provides a selfless love in our relationships. This type of loving friendship forms the basis of marriage, because in marriage, the other person should be your best friend. This intimacy can be seen in Rebekah and Isaac's marriage in the Bible. When Isaac lied to Abimelech, saying Rebekah was not his wife, what gave it away to Abimelech was not that they were having sex or any physical touch. Instead, it was that they were laughing together and actually having a great time. This is what we should expect from marriage. And yes, another part of marriage is sex. Genesis tells for God's design for it. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Sam Allsbury, commenting on this passage, says, the purpose of sex here is to express and deepen the unity between them. There is unity from a friendship to start with in a marriage, but sex comes and unites it more and more and more. It acts as a glue in areas of spiritual, emotional, and physical bonds. It ties what God has put together even closer together. Marriage is more about cultivating a relationship than having sex. Sex merely reinforces the relational strength of the friendship in a marriage. In fact, the purpose of marriage is to point others to God. Ephesians 5:32, talking about the previous Genesis verse, says, this mystery is profound, and I am saying it refers to Christ and the church. Sam Allsbury, elaborating on this passage, says, human marriage is a reflection of the supreme heavenly marriage. Marriage between Christ and his people. Marriage should demonstrate this to the world around us, both to the church and to our neighbors. It has a special God-given role in raising the next generation. Proverb commands, train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. This is part of the job that is given in marriage, to teach the children how to be a man or woman after God's heart. As we continue to understand what marriage is and its role in guiding others to God, we begin to see its effects on the church. Our knowledge of what it is to be a godly man or woman will assist in recognizing the implications of the truth that we are sons and daughters of God. For example, in the church, knowing that young woman over there, that young lady, is a daughter of God, in addition to being made in the image of God, will dictate how I choose to interact with her. In the same spirit, Paul says to Timothy, do not rebuke an older man, but encourage him as you would a father. Younger men as brothers, older women as mothers, younger women as sisters, in all purity. This brings light to the fact that as Christians, we treat fellow believers as family members with respect and honor. As a family in Christ, we need to strive for unity. Unity is not uniformity. Rather, it is coming together despite our differences. In Romans chapter 12, Paul talks about the saying, for as in one body we have many members, and the members do not all have the same function. So though we are many, form one body in Christ, individually members of one another. And so each of us have many different strengths. But God has called us together into this body of Christ that is alive and growing, and its differences are what make us stronger and build us up. It is a healthy, functioning body with the goal of being the hands and feet of Christ. By living this out, we can fulfill Christ's commandment found in Matthew 28:19-20. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit. Our call is to bring more people into the unity with Christ, that they may experience who he is and how he strengthens individuals, relationships, and families. We want other people to experience that. However, the church in reality is not perfect. We will get hurt. We will mess up. We will have wounds and scars. But the church is meant to bind these wounds. Galatians 6 says, brothers, if anyone is caught in any transgression, you who are spiritual should restore him in a spirit of gentleness. As Christians, we are called to come alongside a fallen brother or sister and bring them back to a right relationship with Christ. This should be the goal of every single church discipline: restoration. You don't cut off an arm because there's an infection. You try to heal it. Likewise, in the church, we try to heal the body's infections to maintain its health and to complete its God-given mission. There are many things in the church that can cause an infection. Pornography is one such case. However, it is rarely addressed in comparison to other issues. Though it is not the only one that can destroy a church, it is an issue, one that needs to be addressed right now. Pornography is a growing disease. In an interview with Rick Schatz, the former president of Pure Hope, he commented to me, even though the numbers do not agree on how many people are using pornography, they do agree that it is growing into an epidemic. The reason why this is so terrifying is because porn damages us even when we are not aware of it. Pornography strips away the image of God, and as it does that, we lose the intimacy of a relationship with God. This leads to the loss of our ability to love others. Lacking the base of true friendship, the strength in marriages also lacks. Weaker marriages hinder us from reflecting what a godly man or woman should be. The church will lack godly role models for the future to show how we are to interact with each other. Instead of honor, we have selfish motives. Instead of unity, disunity appears as people hide their secrets for fear of exposure. As these develop, the body of Christ can't function and becomes ineffective.
My name is John Fobert. I'm a professor of higher education and student affairs at Oklahoma State University, and I also lead a national nonprofit organization called 1 in 4, which has worked since 1998 to end sexual violence on college campuses and in the military. How is pornography harming our society at large? From 2008 to 2011, exposure among kids under 13 to pornography went from 14% to 49%. Okay, just in those 3 years. Well, what's a big thing that happened? The ubiquity of the smartphone. There's no question that this generation has more access to pornography than anyone in human history ever. How do we describe to people why pornography and violence go together? Pornography is a recipe for rape. And I'm not saying that anytime someone uses pornography, they're going to commit rape. But what it essentially teaches people is that you're supposed to be violent when you're intimate with somebody. There was a study that came out of the University of Arkansas and NYU showing that 88% of scenes in porn movies include violence by one person towards another, usually a man towards a woman. But what I found most interesting about that research is that when someone hits another person in porn, 95% of the time they respond with either pleasure or they have no response at all. So it's teaching this generation that sex and violence are intertwined. The most interesting study I read most recently is one that did brain scans of men while they were watching pornography. They scanned their brains and they wanted to see what areas of the brain light up when men look at porn. It's the part of the brain that deals with objects, not people. The more we dehumanize someone, the more possible it is to commit violence against them. And that's what porn does.
Sorry. As the video showed, pornography degrades a person. In fact, Rick Schatz says, porn, by its definition, demeans the person in porn. The person is there simply for fulfillment. It just demeans their humanity. It changes the image of God to an object. This objectification of another person has broader effects, terrible effects. In fact, it is one of the leading causes of the sex trade. As Jay Dennis says in his books, Christians and Pornography, the key ingredient to the sex trade is the belief that women are sexual commodities, and internet porn is a vehicle used to teach and train this belief. And so it is out of ignoring the image of God in people that this terrible form of abuse arises. Saying that the image of God does not matter, for they are simply for my fulfillment, is such a selfish mindset, but it has tragic consequences as we ignore what gives people their worth and meaning. Objectification also distorts our perception of ourselves, especially as we look to a body as a measure of a person's worth. As Vaughn Roberts says, is it such a big surprise that many feel inadequate when they compare themselves to the perfect bodies on the screen? He then continues, the saturation of sexualized images of females is leading to body hatred, eating disorders, low self-esteem, and depression. He even states many boys and men have deep concerns about their bodies. These toxic messages come from all around us in culture. Look, for example, at Captain America. It's not hard to get jealous of a physique like that. Imagine if I was constantly filling my head with pictures of him. Suddenly, I would start comparing my body against his, one that few could ever achieve. But this is exactly what porn does. It sets such a high, unrealistic standard that none of us can meet. We lose every time we start to subconsciously compare with these images. Porn promises much. It promises happiness and satisfaction. Instead, it gives turmoil and blocks out the things that give life. In fact, porn often becomes an idol. Even though God said, "You shall have no other gods before me," we still do it. We block our relationship with God with this idol. Suddenly, we look to porn to fulfill our desires. True purity explains the consequences of this. As you let the impurity of devoting yourself to other than God distract your heart, steal your thoughts, and control your actions, you end up obeying the call of your flesh to do things you desperately do not want to do, but can't seem to stop. Pornography just doesn't stop. It continues to grow bigger and bigger and bigger until you can no longer control it. You are much farther than you ever thought you would be. This happens because we block God out. By blocking him out, we lose what it means to love others. Because porn doesn't show us what love is. It only shows us a selfish love that is all about me, for it is for my fulfillment, not others. This selfish love destroys friendships and begins to corrode even our firm set beliefs. Fight the New Drug, which is dedicated to revealing the dangers of porn, says, essentially, porn tells consumers that people are objects for the sole purpose of providing sexual satisfaction, and that is unhealthy for relationships, romantic or otherwise. If we are continuing to look for these people as sexual objects, how is there going to be ground for us to build healthy relationships that actually care for another, because we are so caught up in the golden rule of porn? Love me, love me, love me. Porn destroys what friendship is, and as friendship is the basis of marriage, it destroys what marriage is. In addition to just the friendship aspect, it destroys what sex is designed to do in a marriage. In fact, in Sexual Detox, Jim Chaley says, pornography has the unique power to damage a marriage because it is ultimately about self, not union. Indulging in pornography is a form of psychological isolation, a withdrawal into a tiny world of self-gratification. This is the kind of sexual expression that makes your appetite much larger, even as your world gets smaller. And so, there is a problem that will plague your marriage if you dwell in it. In his book, 10 Lies Men Believe About Porn, Stephen Kuhn says concerning his own life, when his wife and he were together, he was present physically, but distant mentally. He had developed a deeper sense of connection with his computer than with his wife. This story illustrates the sad truth that pornography erases the intimacy in marriage. There is no longer the innocent fun. Instead, you simply look to your wife or to your husband for sexual fulfillment. This is not what a spouse is for. A spouse is there to come alongside and help you along, yet porn destroys this. And sadly, as marriages begin to crumble, they can no longer fulfill the roles of instructing the next generation. They can no longer reflect what God's plan for them in showing the sacrificial love of Christ. To expand on this, Rick Schatz put it this way: most men have memorized Ephesians 5:22, which says women should submit to their husbands. But not only do men not know, but they have also cut out of their Bibles Ephesians 5:25, which says, men, love your wives as Christ loved the church. We have forgotten what it is called. We have forgotten what God has called us to be as men and women. How can we pass this on to our children if we don't know what it is to be a man or woman after God's heart? We cannot tell the next generation. We cannot bring them up in the way they should go if we are not walking the way that we should go. It will fall back on us. One person's sin does not only affect them. The consequences are felt all around them. A man stuck in porn will lose his ability to lead his household properly. He will fail to nurture his wife closer to God. Also, a woman stuck in porn will lose her ability to properly love her husband and spur him on because of her shame. This is a mess we have created by not focusing on God where it belongs, but on ourselves. With the roles of the family so skewed, we don't know how to act in the family of God. We are going to lose what it means to be brothers and sisters in Christ. As Tim Chaley says in Sexual Detox, talking about his own life, how can I marry an anonymous young woman on the screen and then I'd assume I'd be able to turn off that lust and treat other young women in my life as sisters? Porn starts corrupting what we don't even want it to corrupt. It starts corrupting relationships that we don't even think about. We start to look as fellow Christians simply as other people to objectify and to fulfill our desires. In doing this, we sin against each other by looking to each other not as family members, but as objects. Often, because of how serious this offense is, we tend to hide it, which destroys unity in the church. In the porn problem, it says, porn use is usually private and therefore hidden from others. This can lead to a sense of shame and guilt, which leaves people feeling isolated and alone. If we are so focused on shame, how can this bring unity in the church? How can we realize that God has an offer to cleanse us and bring us together? In fact, sad truth is, there isn't such a thing as isolation of those who struggle. Because, according to Barna, 27% of practicing Christians seek out porn. This doesn't even consider the people who have struggled with porn in the past. This cannot be kept in secret. In fact, as Rick Schatz says, we need to recognize that porn is rampant. Porn's power is in its secrecy. We need to talk about it. However, we have failed to talk about it, and we continue to fail to talk about it. Slowly, the hands and feet of Christ have stopped moving. They can no longer have the energy to do it because they are sick. Suddenly, the church loses its effectiveness in doing its mission. People have a much harder time fulfilling the Great Commission when they themselves have a hard time obeying. It is one of the main reasons why porn continues to grow in the church, because leaders are reluctant to speak out about it, maybe because they personally struggle with it. And so, it just grows and grows as people do not speak out against it. This is a very major issue, because if it is not addressed, like the open wound, it will start to fester. Before long, the entire body will feel the effects. This is beyond hope of human repair. I pray this never happens to a church that you are in, but porn possesses a destructive power. It does not stop with devaluing the image of God on a person. It does not stop with ruining a marriage and a family. It does not even stop with destroying a church. It will continue to find more individuals, more marriages, and more churches to consume. This has gone on long enough. It is time for us to stop it. You, however, might feel as I did many years ago. You feel stuck. You feel so powerless to continue as you continue to struggle with porn. It has such a grip on you that even though you know it's terrible, you just can't beat it. Thankfully, this feeling is so far from the truth. On your own, you will never be able to overcome it. No matter how much you try, no matter how many promises you make, you will not be able to beat it. You will stumble again and again and again, as I did. I tried so long to beat it on my own, to muscle through it, but every time I failed. It was only when I realized that it was through God's power that I could overcome this. You see, God demonstrated his love towards us by sending his Son to take sin on his shoulders. He died on the cross to take sin head on. He rose again, proving that sin and death did not have any power on him. He is victorious. Porn has nothing to match the power found in Jesus. In fact, porn has as much power as we give it. And God gives us as much power as we will receive. So fight. Fight not with your own power, but with God's. But how can we fight? In the church, pastors, you must not be afraid to speak out against the evils of pornography, but at the same time, reinforce God's design for sex. Create an environment where sharing the struggle of porn is welcome, yet porn itself is uninvited. As for relationships, be honest with your shortcomings. Build accountability relationships with strong same-sex friends who are willing to ask the hard questions of you. Also, be this friend for others. Love one another enough to continually encourage each other as you continue to fight porn. Finally, on an individual level, do not try to meet sexual temptation head on. Flee from it. If you are tempted to indulge in porn, get out of the area of whatever is tempting you. Install filters on your devices to help you from accidentally stumbling into it. Above all, immerse each of these actions in prayer. God will guide you as you walk forward as a pastor. God will guide you as you walk forward in accountability in marriage. And God will guide you as you walk forward into every battle. So let this be our battle cry. Our God is with us and is fighting for us. So let us follow our God. For only then can we restore the personhood of all individuals, regardless of color or sex. Then we can restore the value of a person that is not based on body type. Then we can remove the idols that have inhibited our hearts and bring back the true friendship that is based on sacrificial love. Then we can bring back the intimacy into marriage instead of the disconnection that porn has brought. As we restore marriages, we can build up the next generation, honoring God. As we understand our own families, we can properly function within the family of Christ. Once again, we can show our secrets and be met with a love that no longer hinders us from unity. Let us come together with our scars and bruises and be made whole in Christ once again. We will walk forward as the body of Christ, bringing people to Him, binding the wounds that still need to be bound. But this will only happen with God's power and if we rely on it.